Hi everyone, it's Winnie from Asian Boss. Do you know that over 50,000 of Americans are living in Japan? Previously, we interviewed a group of Americans in Japan to get their take on the Capitol riot. And a lot of you are interested in knowing what brought them to Japan and what they do as a living. But before we go find out, make sure that you subscribe to Asian Boss and click the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any of our latest videos. Now let's go to see what they get to say. To start off, can you tell us where you're from and how long you've been in Japan?
Sure, I am from Eureka, California, and I have been in Japan about a year and a half now.
I'm from Jacksonville, Florida, and I've been in Japan on and off for a total of about maybe 6 years now.
I've lived in Japan for 10 and a half years. Before I moved here, I lived in Boston for about 10 years.
I was originally from Chicago, and I've been in the U.S. for over 30 years. I've been in Japan, in Tokyo specifically, for about the last 2.5 years.
So I'm an American. I was born in the United States, but I grew up on Okinawa. And I went to high school and college in Atlanta, Georgia. And then I came back to Japan maybe in the late 70s.
What brought you to Japan then, and did it meet your expectation?
I moved to Japan with my husband and my two boys when they were 4 and 6 years old, and now they're 14 and 17. And we originally moved here because of his job. And then subsequently, I started working here as well and finding other things to do.
My husband's work asked him to come here for a 2 to 3 year tour. He's in the accounting industry, and I had never been to Asia, any Asian country, before he was asked to move here. And I think he got the call on a Friday afternoon, will you move to Japan? And we had to decide by Monday if we would come here. So it's been amazing. I was really scared to move to a new place that I knew nothing about. Right when we got on the plane, I was having like a heart palp. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm about to have a panic attack, I think, as we were about to move over here. Just because I didn't know how different it would be, really.
It was actually work, so my company sent me here as a part of my job. So my company originally was in Chicago, but it's a Japanese company, so they sent me here on assignment, and I've been here working for them for the last 2.5 years, and it's been a great experience.
What was your expectation for Japan?
You know, seeing the videos and the movies and everything, I always pictured it as a very high-tech country with a lot of technology, with a lot of lights and everything, and I think it is that, from a lifestyle point of view, very much like that. But it is interesting though, because there's a lot of tradition that's still very alive here.
I've always been in love with Japanese culture, not necessarily work culture, but Sailor Moon. I grew up watching Sailor Moon and anime and things like that. And basically in 2015, I was in America, and my job then was accounting and finance. And I realized that, I really like business. However, do I like the American way of doing business? And I've always appreciated, the kind of companies that Japan built, because they built really long-lasting companies, in a sense that a lot of the world's oldest companies are in Japan. So how is it that, Japan can build companies that last hundreds and hundreds of years long, yet in America we have companies that, flop after 5 or 10 years? So I decided to get my MBA here, and after getting my MBA, I graduated in August. I got a job at a really great company.
Do you then consider yourself as an expat or an immigrant in Japan?
That's a really good question. I definitely consider myself as an expat because I see myself going home.
I guess if I was looking for citizenship in Japan, I guess I would consider myself an immigrant, but I'll be here permanently, but I'm not really looking for citizenship. What I think is that people consider immigrants as people coming from maybe a developing country or seeking a home elsewhere and seeking citizenship in that place, whereas maybe expats are going to be living in said country for a long period of time, but they're not necessarily going to disassociate themselves with where they came from.
I guess I'm closer to an immigrant, which is interesting to think about. Just this year there have been so many things going on, like, Black Lives Matter and that kind of thing, and I didn't really ever have an experience with getting discriminated against that I can remember until coming to Japan. My first job was in Aichi, and so I think a lot of Japanese people thought I was Brazilian because there was a huge Brazilian population there. And so some of the things were things like getting stopped on my bicycle to make sure that I hadn't stolen it, or like following me around different shops, like Uniqlo, for example, when I was shopping to make sure I wouldn't steal the clothes. And I could hear them talking about me in Japanese.
What were some of the challenges that you faced living in Japan as an American?
One aspect that I think most Americans face is that no matter how well you speak Japanese, people are very sometimes hesitant to approach you in the same way that they would a Japanese person when you go to a cafe or a restaurant or what have you. And then when you start speaking Japanese, it's kind of like, oh, this is a conundrum. This is something that I haven't dealt with before. And sometimes communication becomes difficult as much as you try to communicate in their own language, just because there's a bit of a shock factor.
Just the biggest challenge that I faced was the stigma of everything that it means to be an American. You know, I think there's this idea that being an American is kind of this celebrity kind of thing, especially in small parts of Japan. But really, there are positive and negative stigmas that come along with being an American, and you know, dealing with those while also learning the culture that you're trying to assimilate to is very difficult.
What were the negative things that you've experienced?
I think it's just like the questions of, oh, do you have a gun? Like, is it dangerous in America? Like, are you dangerous? Like, the questions about politics, like, do you believe this? Do you believe that? And politics are taboo in school, so it's really hard to navigate the questions and answers, but also giving them the truth, because I believe that students deserve that.
Probably gender equality. So I think with me, I'm an exception because I'm a woman and I'm a foreigner and I'm an American. However, I see like Japanese women who have lived here their whole lives, and I can definitely see that there's, you know, a glass ceiling. Like in the US, we call it a glass ceiling, but in Japan, I feel like it's literally a concrete ceiling. Like you can see it, it's there.
What do you mean by that?
It's very difficult, I think, for women to advance in their careers, and also there's a lot of stereotypes against women with higher degrees or women who are, you know, corporate climbers, like women who, you know, want to advance in their careers and things like that.
Oh, by the way, can you tell us a little bit about what you do as to make a living here in Japan?
I am a personal trainer and health and wellness coach, as well as, since I've been here, I have had other opportunities in charity organizations and involved in fundraising, and lastly, as a partner in a Korean streetwear band where my partner lives in Korea and I live here, and we collaborate and have an online brand.
Previously, I was in the United States Air Force, and after getting out, I decided to do something completely different and to teach English. My positions kind of evolved over time, so I went from just being like a lowly assistant to like helping create the curriculum, and really just helping my students overall prepare for life in high school and things like that. So it ceased being just about English and more about, you know, life development.
I went to Japanese law school, and I also worked inside the Japanese parliament. So as a consequence of that, I have a public policy firm here in Tokyo. And what we do is we help foreign capital companies, embassies, Fortune 500 corporations, global corporations, fix their situations with regard to what their interaction should be with the government.
I'm actually self-employed, working also freelance, and I work as a life transition and career coach here in Japan.
Do you think being able to speak Japanese is kind of like a prerequisite to work in Japan, or?
No, actually some of my clients don't even speak Japanese, and they're having amazing careers. One of them, she didn't even have any experience before moving here. She got a job and then she worked her way up in a year, and now she's at, I think, almost director level at a company just based on having a master's degree.
Because I was assigned here, the job was already set. I didn't have to apply for anything. I have friends who's in the same industry, the same role, that can't find a job because everything is in Japanese.
Yeah.
The application is in Japanese, all the interviews are in Japanese. So for them who don't speak Japanese, it's extremely hard for them to find a job in Japan.
A lot of people say that expats in Japan, they either work as an English teacher or they have a very low paid job because it's hard for them to find a decent job back in their country. Have you heard of that?
I have actually because I'm in Facebook, right? I'm part of these expat networks on Facebook, and a lot of the foreigners who are on there, they're mostly English teachers, essentially struggling to find pay. So they do struggle financially. So I do see that a lot.
Actually, I find it the opposite. I find that people that are other English speakers that are here are actually quite smart, creative, and resourceful people that spend a lot of time studying Japanese, the culture, have a true interest in some facet of Japanese culture, and they feel it, such a kinship with it, they feel they wanted to move here to be a part of it. So I don't feel like in any way the person they couldn't get a job in the US, but definitely were more of an international spirit or had some connection to Japan that really brought them here.
I think that that's a dangerous stereotype. While a lot of people do use education as a gateway to do other things in Japan, I think that you also have to understand the needs of Japan. And there's a reason why there's so many teachers from these foreign countries like America, Australia, England, in Japan. It's because there is an emphasis on having that native speaker in the education system. So while I understand that stereotype, like because of that, I also think that it kind of minimizes the impact that Americans or any other expats could have on Japan and helping Japan and whatever Japan's goals are.
Often I'm asked if I'm an English teacher, and I say, yeah, I was an English teacher and I really enjoyed it. Education itself is a really valuable profession, and a lot of those English teachers end up going into a different career in Japan after working 1 or 3 or 5 years. So for many people, it's a springboard into perhaps a profession that they find more personally valuable.
Also in Japan, there's a perception of overwork. At the Japanese office, do you see that or do you hear that?
Yes, 1,000%.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I think that one of the biggest shocks when we first moved here was Friday night, 5 o'clock. In the US, the office would be empty. Like no one would be in the office. I swear that the office got busier at 5 o'clock. I don't know why.
Friday?
Yes, yeah. In the US, even if you had to do like admin stuff, you would just do it on Monday. Like just Friday is sacred. No one works past like 4 or 5. Some of the Japanese staff have told me that like they would prefer to stay late on Friday so they don't have to work as much on the weekend.
I didn't think it was real, people committing suicide because of overwork. But there was this big scandal at this particular company. I don't want to say the name of the company, but a girl my age at that time, she was 23, early 20s like me at that time, and she basically committed suicide due to overwork. And the Japanese government did like a whole investigation on it and everything, and the Japanese government basically they concluded that it was because the company didn't have certain regulations and they weren't following, labor protocols and things like that regarding overwork. And I think the company was fined like a total of $1 million. And then that money, of course, was given to the girl's family. And that's just her example, like the fact that, this company was overworking people so much that a girl around my age, committed suicide was, pretty crazy to me at that time. And I still think about it now, and it's like, it's very sad that it exists, you know what I mean? Because we don't hear about these things in America.
Well, yeah, I had that same problem when I first came here, that I was put into a situation where I had to work alongside Japanese colleagues, and they work all the time. And that wasn't the way that I grew up. That wasn't the kind of culture that I came out of. But over time, I've come to ascribe to that kind of demand.
Do you think that kind of like Japanese overwork environment also applies to foreigners here?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So that's the way things are here. So you need to, come up to speed, and you need to accommodate the culture here doesn't need to accommodate you. And so frequently foreigners are criticized because they take off on Saturday and Sunday, of course, and they take off at 5:30 because they want to go home and have dinner, of course, right? But that's not the way it goes here. And so it does generate animosity and some kind of negative vibrations.
To be honest, I don't think they have that expectation of foreigners. I think for my company, they say, well, you know what? It's okay, go home. I remember when I first got here, there was a typhoon warning, and my manager came to me and says, okay, there's a typhoon warning, you should go home. I was here for 2 weeks, so I'm packing up ready to go. None of my coworkers were leaving. And it was just very awkward, so they say, you know what, we're gonna take care of him because he doesn't know what he's doing right now.
There are many foreigners that believe that that the way that some things are done are inefficient. The company cultures, as I've heard and have not experienced myself, are that you are to stay until your boss leaves or you are to stay until a certain time. And so there are foreigners that believe if I've completed all of my work, then I should be able to just go home.
Not just in the work environment, but in general, do you think as a foreigner you're kind of treated differently, like in a good sense or in a bad sense?
I would say treated pretty well. I don't know if you've heard of something called the gaijin card. Gaijin means like foreign person in Japanese. So gaijin card is your foreigner card. So for example, if you get stopped by the police for jaywalking, you just throw down this it's a figurative gaijin card and just be like, so sorry, I don't understand Japanese. I'm just trying to go home. Help me, please, And then usually they'll let you go.
As someone who has been stopped on my bicycle by police a couple times, just like, is this your bicycle? Did you steal this bicycle? No, it's my bicycle. I'm just coming back from the grocery store. Those kind of incidences make me feel like I've been singled out. But from private citizens, not the police, but private citizens, I feel like I'm treated just like everyone else.
Most commonly it's in restaurants, smaller little restaurants where maybe it's an older person that runs the place. They don't have an English menu. And I've walked in a few times and they're like, no foreigners. And at first it really bugs me, but now it doesn't bug me at all. Like, I don't blame them for not, wanting to try to, it's probably very difficult, to try to communicate. And I'm sure there's been bad examples where there have been rude tourists who've come in and not understood that and have treated, them badly because of that, and that's like, so I understand now and it doesn't bother me. But at first I was so scared sometimes to go in and...
How has living in Japan changed your perspective as an American?
Oh, it's changed my perspective greatly. They've often said that you really don't know your country until you live in a foreign country. And I think that's true here. It's certainly my experience. So people ask you about your country, and if you don't know that answer, you feel kind of stupid. So it forces you to dig in a little bit more and to understand, so the next time somebody asks you a similar question, you can answer that question in a nice, succinct way.
So living in the US, it was so multicultural and lots of different ethnicities represented, and people there can be pretty openly racist. And now being the person in another country that doesn't really very well speak the language, and I can't read or write, it has completely changed me as a person. To be more empathetic and understand the plight of others and to really help those in need.
Oh, it's changed my perspective a lot. So in America, I would say that I was very individualistic. I'm not going to say that I didn't consider, my friends and family and the people around me then, but my priority in the past has always been me. Whereas, living in Japan, working here, both personally and also professionally, I've noticed that, collectivism is actually a really wonderful thing. It can be if used properly.
For example?
You can walk around now and you see everyone has a mask on, and, they're not necessarily just thinking about their health, but they're also considering other people. And I think in America, we don't have that.
Do you have plans actually moving back to the U.S. or going back home?
At this moment, no, but I do have a 2-year-old son who's half Japanese and half American, and so it is really important for us to consider like him growing up multicultural and having both languages.
No, I have no plans on moving back to America. America has been my home for, my childhood, and I learned everything that I could from being in America. I don't see any reason to go back to a place that serves no more lessons, like that I can't learn any more from. That's one reason. The second is I don't necessarily feel safe in America, whereas I do feel safe in Japan, and safety pretty much is key. And the culture agrees with me here, so like my personality kind of fits being here, so why would I leave?
I really like my job and I really like Tokyo, so maybe in 4 years. I want to find ways to give back to America somehow, so I feel like I've appreciated Japan and I'm working here, I'm living here, I'm doing volunteering here. Like that's my way of like appreciating Japan and giving back to Japan in a sense, but at the end of the day, America is always my home.
No, I don't. This is my home. This is where everything is. I've been building it for more than 40 years. My family's here. My son's here. I've got, 4 kids. They live here. This is where I plan to retire.
Would you consider moving to the US?
Absolutely. I mean, the funny thing is, I think as the world kind of globalizes as well, there's so many opportunities, and going overseas, you want to go where you're treated best, where there's the best opportunities.
For those back home who might be curious about like living in Japan or coming to work in Japan, what would be something that you think that they should be aware of in advance?
Come in with an open mind and learn why things are done certain ways. Like if a process seems really long, why is that? And try to learn from that. And maybe there's a reason, So ask yourself that before just coming over thinking you're going to change the world.
Yeah.
I guess like one of the biggest things is staying curious and not taking things personally, and trying to be true to yourself. Never feel like you can't be yourself, and yet just try as much as you can to also adapt and be flexible. Try to take your ego out of the situation and just enjoy the experience.
Japan isn't the cure-all for whatever is wrong with you. A lot of people come here and they think that I'm sad, so I'm going to go to Japan, this place that I read about, that I saw in YouTube, that I watched in anime. And wherever you go, there you are. So those problems, those feelings that you had like when you were in America or when you were in England or Australia or Canada, wherever you're from, you're going to bring those feelings with you here. And when you're alone and when the honeymoon phase is over, those feelings are going to come back, and it's going to be even harder. So I would just say, like, know your reason why for coming here, and don't make that reason, because I want to feel better. Make it like something actionable, something you can do, something you can experience, something you can feel.